Okay, so this is part 2 of our shir on what is your relationship to the Beis Midrash. And it might be a short shir because really, if you remember, I had planned to do all of this last time. So we'll see where it goes. Okay, so let's start with a review. Okay, this is in Pirkei Avos 5:14. Arba midos beholchei lebeis midrash. There are 4 midos, which I think the translation here, modes of behavior or patterns of behavior, I think is best. With regards to those who go to the Beis Midrash. Holech ve'eno ose, one who goes and doesn't do, schar halicha biyado, he has the reward for going. Ose ve'eno holech, one who does but doesn't go, schar masa biyado, he has the reward. One who does but doesn't go has the reward for doing in his hand. 3, holech ve'ose chasid, one who goes and does is pious. 4, lo holech v'lo ose, one who doesn't go and doesn't do Russia is wicked. By the way, last time I remember I mentioned to you that I didn't like the translation of chassid as pious. It has too much of a like Christian connotation. So I found a good definition of it, which is or a good translation of it. I think I read to you last time that chassid it comes from the word chesed, which means excess or extra, and that you have a tzaddik who's doing what he's supposed to do, or doing like following the letter of the law, and then a chassid is someone who's going beyond that. So I thought to myself, you know, what would be a good translation of chassid? So if tzaddik is righteous and chassid is beyond righteous, so then extra righteous. Okay, I think that's a good non funky connotation thing, and it also is good translation because it points to the fact that the word chesed means excess. Okay, so I like that. Okay, so continuing with our review, we asked 11 questions. Okay, so let's review the questions here. And if you have any questions on the questions, even though we're reviewing, then I don't mind going back and talking about this. We're going to review for everything for the first part. Okay. Question 1, what does Beis Midrash mean in this context? Is it talking about a halachic Beis Midrash, meaning like there is a halachic thing called a Beis HaKnesses, a shul, and a Beis Midrash, and they have halachos that pertain to it? Or could this just be an ad hoc Beis Midrash, like Brooks College Beis Midrash, which is like a room in the basement that's dedicated to learning? Or another way to say it, is this a communal Beis Midrash, or could it even be like a personal study? Like, is it any place devoted to or designated for learning, or is it specifically like a certain certain activities happen there on a communal level? Or is it just any place where lots of people learn? Or is it even a Zoom room, right? Like we ended up, spoiler alert, we ended up saying last time that according to Rashi, at least, then even learning on Zoom would count for a Beis Midrash for Rashi's interpretation. Okay. 2, what is the significance of the Beis Midrash compared to the alternatives? You could even classify that in question 1 if you wanted to, but this is more asking like, why make a big deal about the Beis Midrash? 3, why does the Mishnah use the term oseh and ma'aseh? It says holech ve'eno oseh, he goes but doesn't do. We said it would make more sense to say he goes and doesn't learn. Or if it says he has the reward for doing, we'd say he has the reward for learning, not for doing. What is doing here? 4, what is schar halicha? What does it mean you get reward for going? And do we apply this to other mitzvos? Like I mentioned, if you go to the store to buy a lulav, I've never heard anyone say that you get rewarded for going to the store. Like, on the other hand, if you run to shul to daven, we say that you do get reward for going to shul. So to what extent can we apply this to other things? 5, what is schar ma'aseh? What is the reward for doing? Presumably it's going to be learning, but again, doing is a little weird. 6, what defines each of these people? For example, why doesn't the 4th guy go or learn? Why does the first guy go but not learn? Okay. 7, why is the holech ose considered chassid? Right? Why is he considered extra righteous? Right? Isn't he just doing what you're supposed to do? Like, you're telling me you go to the Beis Midrash and you learn, then you're somehow extra righteous? No, if anything, you're righteous or you're doing good, but you're not extra. Similarly, why is the guy who doesn't go and doesn't learn considered a Russia? That also seems extreme. Maybe say that he's not a learner, or he's not going to gain, or he's even a transgressor, but wicked or evil sounds extreme. 9, why are the second two clauses phrased in terms of the person's status, and the first 2 are in terms of the result, right? We don't designate this as a certain type of person. At 10, at what point do you become categorized in one of these ways? How often do you have to go and do in order to become a chassid? How many instances would it take to demote you? And then how definitive is this mishnah? Is it saying that you should always go to the Beis Midrash because being a chassid is always better? What if it's a lame Beis Midrash? What if it's really far away? Like, what are the practical considerations? Okay, so let's review Rashi's answer. And rather than reading over all, so first of all, I mentioned that Rashi himself, his commentary is a little sketchy in the sense that it's not authoritative. There's different versions of it. So we hobbled together Rashi's opinion from 3 other commentaries: Rav Ovadia miBar Tanura, Rav Yaakov b'Rabbi Shimshon, and then the Rashbats. And we're going to call all of them Rashi. And I thought maybe a good way to review would be to make a chart. Okay, because I like charts. Okay, so Rashi says, and again, stop me and interrupt me if you have any other questions. This is all review, but I don't mind going and clarifying things. Okay. Holech ve'ena oseh, according to Rashi, means that he goes to the, oh, this is the wrong size font. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. He goes to the Beis Midrash, but doesn't learn actively, or doesn't understand what he learns. Okay, so schar halicha biado. So we saw that what does it mean he has the reward for going? So the one who said that is the hold on. Who said a good interpretation? Oh yeah, he toiled for the sake of the mitzvah. Okay, so he toiled for the sake of a mitzvah. Okay, which means we interpreted that to mean that he is like strengthening his attachment to the value system of Torah. So in other words, even though he's not learning, at least he is putting in an effort, and putting in effort will transform your values, and maybe he'll eventually be the guy who does come to learn. Okay, or at the very least, this is what he's spending his time on. And compared to the alternatives, he's not going to the, I don't know, to the bar, right? I don't know what people go if they're not in the Beis Midrash. Okay, okay. Osev ve'ena holech, he does, but he doesn't go, which means he learns at home. Okay, but doesn't go to the Beis Midrash. So what does that mean? Schar ma'aseh biado. He gets the benefits of learning, but he doesn't, the Rashbat says he doesn't get the benefits of the discussion or argumentation with other people. So we said that what that means basically is that the quality of his learning is going to suffer, or not suffer. The quality of his learning is not as good as it could have been had he gone there, because we know Ezu Chacham Halomim Mikol Adam, who's wise, someone who learns from everyone. Or if you are, what do you call it? If you are putting your own ideas to the challenge, having, putting them out there and having them be criticized or corrected by other people, you're going to gain more. Or even just the environment of other people are learning, it's going to affect you. It's going to make you less distracted. It's going to make you more into learning. Okay. Holech v'oseh chassid. Okay, so this is he goes and learns. That's plain shot. Chassid. So we said chassid means not that he is doing extra, this just means he is the highest level of learning. Okay, meaning he's going to get the most out of his learning. Lo holech v'lo oseh. So he doesn't go and he doesn't even learn by himself is a rasha. We said that doesn't mean that he's wicked. It just means that he is on the lowest level in terms of learning. Okay, in terms of learning. Okay, so I think that reviews Rashi. Okay, any questions on Rashi from last time? Okay, Rambam and Rabbeinu Bachya did not give us much, okay? But what they did give us, they didn't explain every clause of the Mishnah. The main thing that they gave us is they defined what a chassid is and what a rasha is. Chassid is someone who goes out of his way to perfect his mitos, intellectual and ethical, okay? And this is just an example, meaning, like we said, that if you could accomplish a certain amount by learning at home, but if you go out of your way to put yourself in the best environment for learning, so you're going to develop more. And the fact that you are prioritizing your own perfection means that you are on the track to success. Okay, so I'm going to actually add that here. One who prioritizes their own perfection. Okay, and then the rasha is someone who is lax in prioritizing their own perfection when they have the ability to do so. Okay, And that was the only thing that the Rambam really said here. He didn't really spell out these other categories. Okay, now we're ready for new stuff. Okay, so we're going to do two Mefarshim here. Okay, I'm calling them the Meiri and the Rabbeinu Yonah. And in the Meiri, I'm going to classify the Sforno because I think he helps. Okay, as we read the Meiri is going to sound suspiciously like the Rashi. So one of our main questions is going to be, what is the difference between the Meiri and Rashi? Okay, so just keep a mind out for that. Okay, so let's go here. And we're going to do what we did last time, which is I'll type the translations as we go, and you can stop me if you have questions here, and we'll stop and analyze. Okay, holech, he goes. What does that mean? Kolomar, this means to say, sheholech v'gole limkom Torah. He goes and exiles himself to a place of Torah. Okay, so that's a little weird, right? Exile. What do you think? I know we haven't read all of it yet. What do you think exile means? Like, what connotation or implication does exile have to you?
I was going to say it has a very negative connotation.
Yeah, it does, right? We in Judaism, we don't look favorably upon exile, and even in society, let's say like if you're in I don't know why this is the first example that comes to mind, but in Soviet Russia, right, you get exiled as a punishment to go to Siberia, or even in Greece and Rome, exile means that you're like kicked out of the city, So it sounds like it has a negative connotation. Okay, so let's keep that in mind, and then we'll form a picture here. Okay, but he doesn't do. Ratzalomar she'ein limudo matzliach, i.e., his learning is not successful. Okay, ve'eno ole biado, and he doesn't attain it. Okay, like he doesn't like accomplish anything. He doesn't accomplish anything much. Let's say much. He doesn't accomplish much. Okay. Now, if you think about this, okay, ose usually means to do or make. Okay, but if you look at the Meiri's interpretation here, I think we have a different translation for how he's interpreting do. What word would be better than he learns but he doesn't do? How would you translate that in English in a way that captures what the Meiri is saying?
Maybe he doesn't gain or attain.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to say it, right? Doesn't in fact, I think that's a good way to do it. I'm just gonna I'm gonna do it in a way that actually still works with ose, which is like this. He goes but isn't productive, right? Like ose, like his learning doesn't produce stuff. Okay, I mean, the way you said it is also good, Nava. I'm just trying to stick with something that like could be literally translated as ose. Okay, mikomakom, nevertheless, schar halicha biado, he has the reward for going, v'nigmal alaha, and he is compensated by God for it. Okay, meaning he gets a schar. Okay, I don't know why he has to say nigmal alaha. Okay, we'll do the full picture, then we'll analyze. Okay, osev ena holech, he goes but he doesn't. He does but he doesn't go. So meaning he is productive, right? We have to switch this also. He is productive but doesn't go. Klomar, i.e., she'eno matriach atmo, he doesn't bother himself, or like bother himself might not be the best way. Burden himself. Leilith lamakum shemarbitzim bo Torah, to go to a place where they. Okay, I struggle to translate the term marbitz Torah. People use the term marbitz. I'm not satisfied with the English translation here in my mind, but like. You know what the word prolific is? Like a prolific writer, like they write a lot of high quality stuff. So there's a better term for English for this. Marbitim bo Torah. Give me a second, or chime in if you have a translation of marbitz.
I've heard it generally translated as like spread.
Spread, yeah. So it has like an implication of spreading in a in a flourishing type way.
Would that be decimate?
Would that be what?
Like decimate?
Decimate?
Thrive?
Are you thinking disseminate?
Possibly.
Decimate means to kill.
All right, it's a different word. Yeah.
Really killing it at Torah. Yeah.
Are
where
you
they-
thinking thrive maybe?
Yeah. So let's just say thrive. Okay. They actually, I'm going to use flirt.
I did think
Or-
that decimate sounded wrong as I was saying it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. But I knew what you meant though. Okay. So they flourish in Torah. Aval misasik b'Torah bebeso v'olabiado. But he involves himself in Torah at home and is successful. Afal pi she'im haya holech l'malkum Torah, even though had he gone to a place of Torah, haya oleb yadu yosef yoser, he would gain far more. Mikol makom, nevertheless, schar masa biyado, the reward for product, for doing. I think we also have to translate this as for his productivity. Is he has the reward for his productivity? He has the reward for his productivity. Okay, last two, and then we will analyze here. One who goes and does, and is productive, is pious. So this is shemis amel kol kach la'avas Torah, that he forces himself to toil that much for love of Torah. Okay. And then this is the weirdest one to me. Lo holech v'lo ose rasha. He doesn't go and isn't productive, is wicked. What does this mean? Shemivaze haTorah, for he degrades Torah, umisrashal b'limudo, and is lax in learning it. Okay. And as I said, I'm going to pair this with Sforno. Okay, it's not necessarily the same interpretation, but I just want to read it because I think it's along the similar lines. Okay, and then we'll stop and analyze. So he says, Amar Shabahalicha. This says that Shabahalicha Beis Midrash, that by going to the Beis Midrash, Yizke Ha'adam B'nesh Yichabed es Torah, a person will attain merit by honoring the Torah. Okay, and I'm calling attention to this because this is the opposite of degrading the Torah. Okay, by honoring the Torah, the es mishanasna, and the one who gave it, capitalized because it's God, b'meshe yitrach laleches, in that he bothers or burdens himself to go ulavaksha b'makom hava'ad, and to seek it out at a gathering place. You can see the similarities between him and Meiri, but he's emphasizing the burdening, the fact that there are a lot of people there, it's like a makom Torah. And in the fact that he goes and does. That he goes and involves himself in Torah with his friends. Okay, so sorry, I forgot an and. And in the fact that he goes and does, and goes and involves himself in Torah with his friends, Ose chesed, he does chesed, right, which we're saying is extra goodness, bahosif chachma la'atma uluzalaso, by increasing wisdom for himself and for others. K'omram, as Chazal say, umechavera yosem rabosai, I have learned more from my peers than from my rabbis. Okay, that's in Tainus 7a. And he says, V'lachein karo chasid v'hefek ze rasha. Therefore, he is called a chasid, okay, which is the opposite of which is a rasha. The opposite of which is a rasha. Now, just before we analyze the Meiri, what does it look like he is translating chasid as? Doesn't sound like he's translating it as extra righteous. How would you translate chasid here, based on his interpretation?
I feel like it's kind of like goodness in that he's like chesed as the way it's more typically translated.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, just because like he wants like the best that he can get for himself and his friends,
Right.
or for the other.
Right. So I agree with you. I think the way to translate here is a person who does chesed, right? Or a kind person. He's being kind to others and kind to himself. In other words, just to explain what I mean here, the way we were learning chassid last time is in terms of your obligations, that that you have what you're obligated in, and then you could do it in the best way possible. That really doesn't take into account like other people. Here he's saying that you are basically creating the greatest net goodness. I'll say that here, i.e. Creating the greatest net goodness all around. Okay, and a rasha would be someone who is the opposite of a chesed, which is i.e. withholding additional goodness from himself and others. Okay, so let's now take a step back here. Okay, instead of going on a what do you call a micro level, what would you say? Okay, let's go on a micro level. Okay, sorry. Let's fill in our chart here. Okay, and then we'll see if we can answer our questions here. Okay, so holech ve'eno ose schar halicha biado. So someone who goes, which the Meiri is saying means he exiles himself to a place of Torah, ve'eno ose, and he's not productive. So he has the reward for going and is compensated by God. So now can we figure out what do you think he means when he says he exiles himself to a place of Torah? And why does he use that negative term exile, or a negative connotation term here? So either like, can we explain it, or can we give an example of what this means? And if it helps, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, wasn't there a story in the Gemara of like of a rabbi who was walking and a rich man like found him and said like, oh, you should come learn in my city, and then like I'll pay you a lot, and he didn't want to because he preferred to, I guess live more humbly, but live in a place where there was a lot of teachers and a lot of Torah.
Yes, that I don't know the exact story you're talking about, but I think that's what it means. So just can you universalize from that and this? What does exile mean here, or why does the Meiri use the word exile?
Well, as we said, exile generally doesn't connotate good things or comfort, at least. So it could be that preferred Torah over.
Okay, good. Yeah, right. So I think what he is learning this as here is so holech ve'eno ose is he gives up the comfort / conveniences of his current location and moves, right? Like he actually like is moving in order to be in a place of Torah, right? So you can give examples of that from like the Gemara or whatever. What would be like a good modern day example of this? I think there's one that either all of you, I don't know about Fega, but I know Nava and Brooke can relate to this. You have done this on a small scale.
Is this going to Israel for the year?
Yeah, going to Israel for the year, exactly, right? Yeah. So that's not you're not giving up home forever, right? Because we live in a world where, like, okay, in the olden days, let's say like not the olden days, but let's say like in Europe, before World War II, then there was really only one big yeshiva. Is Volozhin, so if you were in, I don't know how far they came to go to Volozhin, but like you would leave home forever and, or at least for like, for the foreseeable future and go there and relocate permanently. You couldn't just like take a plane and go back and forth. But I think that people do this in smaller measure when they relocate for a year or for a discrete amount of time to maximize their Torah. Like you're giving up all the conveniences and comfort of home in order to maximize Torah, or let's say like, I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, but I hate New York. I really, really hate New York. There's only two reasons why I'm here, which is my community in terms of what I gain from it in terms of Torah, and my community in terms of what I can give to it in terms of Torah, in terms of my teaching and my learning and my like being involved in Torah here. But otherwise I really don't like New York City, So exiling, I think, is why it uses a negative connotation, because it's a trade-off. You're giving up comfort, family, friends, or whatever, and you're going for Torah. Okay. So can we explain what he means? So he's not successful, right? So we're not talking about a guy here in Rashi, it was a little hard to tell. Like he says he goes to the Beis Midrash and doesn't learn or doesn't actively learn. Sounds like he is like we gave the example last time, like the guy who goes to the person who goes to school and just spaces out, that the person is somewhat culpable. Here, I think this could even be someone who goes and they just don't end up being that successful in Torah. Like not everyone is going to become like a Rabbi Akiva, So this is, in other words, this is not a value judgment. This is here. He doesn't. Okay, so he gives up communities, but doesn't end up being successful, not necessarily by fault of his own. Okay, of his own. So schar halicha biado, the reward for going is in his hand, and the Meiri says he's rewarded for it. So can we explain what that means? Because the Meiri doesn't really elaborate on that. He just says that God will compensate him for it, and he uses the word gemul, like he'll be paid for it, by God. But like, is this just saying like, I don't know, like the normal ideas of reward and punishment? Like, my question is, can we get any idea out of this other than like you get rewarded for doing good things?
I mean, I have a further question on this.
Sure.
Like, I don't understand how learning can not be successful, because right now everybody's going to be Rabbi Akiva, but I feel like even if you're still learning and even if you don't come to an idea,
right,
just learning in general is successful.
Okay.
Even to a small degree.
Okay, so I think you're actually on track. I think your question contains an answer in it. Okay, which is, but I'll say it as a question anyway. So what does it mean he's not successful? So I can think of two answers just to answer that question. One could mean that he doesn't succeed in terms of the goals he set for himself. Okay, my Rebbe, Rabbi Moskowitz, said when he was in yeshiva, then he wanted to be like a posek. He wanted to attain mastery of halacha, but he gradually came to realize that he has a horrible memory, and he can't be a posek if he doesn't have a good memory. So he didn't succeed in that sense. Okay, that's one way. Another way is that he doesn't succeed relative to the standards that other people are engaged in Torah. Like, let's say, for example, let's say you go, I'm gonna use a non-Jewish analogy here. Let's say you go to university to study something. Let's say you go to medical school, right? And let's say you flunk out. Okay. So we would say that like you still gain stuff. Like I'm sure you learn stuff about the human body, but the standards that are expected there are that like you become a doctor and like you didn't attain those standards, So it could be that, or it could really mean that he just does not gain much in his learning. Like there's another mishnah in Pirkei Avos that is close to this. Hold on just 1 second here. Let me just share the whole screen. Let me close this here. Oops, I just closed the thing I meant to keep open. There you go. Hold on. All Torah. Same parak. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but the parak that we're in Pirkei Avos has a lot of these. There are 4 types of blank. And so if you ever see a statement like that, then chances are it comes from Pirkei Avos 5, chapter 5. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to look at this here. Yeah. So here is an example of this. Okay. Arba mios biyoshim lifnei chachamim. There are 4 traits in those who sit before the chachamim. Hold on, just let me close my background windows here. Okay. Svog umashpech mishameres v'nafa. A sponge. I always forget the words here. A colander, a strainer, and a nafa, and a sieve. Svog shehu sofek esakol. A sponge absorbs everything. Okay. Mashpech shemachnis bezo umotzi bezo. A mashpech, a colander. No. A funnel. I think mashpech is a funnel. Yeah, funnel. Takes in from this end and okay. I don't remember what the things are. Basically, there are people who I remember what the meanings are though. There are students who basically absorb everything. There are students who absorb the good, and they like don't hold on to the bad. Okay. Then there are students who absorb the bad and don't hold on to the good, and then there's students who just can't retain anything. Okay. And so it could just be that like you are just a horrible learner, and you just gain so little that we just say it like objectively, you're failing at your learning. Okay. And Nava's right. It's not like you're not gaining anything, but let's take that then. So what are you being rewarded for? And the interesting thing, by the way, is he says that he alludes to this in that when he talks about the guy who is productive but doesn't go, he doesn't bother or burden himself to going to a place where they flourish in Torah. That might be part of the answer about why this guy who is burdening himself to go there, but just not successful, like why he is rewarded. So our question, again, just to focus on our question here. So what is the reward for going that he gets, even though he's not learning? He's not successful in his learning. And I'll give you another a statement of Chazal, by the way, which I think points to the same thing. There's a statement about learning that Chazal say, "Echad hamarbe ve'echad hama'amid ubilvad sheyichaven libo l'shamayim." Doesn't matter whether you come away with a lot or a little, as long as your heart is directed to heaven. Okay, and they say that about other things, but definitely about learning.
I'm thinking like even if you go and you don't learn a lot and you're not successful by certain standards,
yeah,
maybe just like the minimal ideas that you gain or like some kind of greater understanding of what you were trying to achieve.
Okay, that's definitely true, but I'll tell you why I don't think that is why that's what it means here, because that's kind of saying he gets the reward for doing, but just his doing is very, very little, or his reward for doing is very, very little. So this makes it sound like there's a separate reward for going that is not connected to how much you accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the reward. It's interesting. This is the reward that the other guy does not get, right? Because the other guy, okay, no. Yeah, right. It sounds like the other guy only gets the reward for doing, but not the reward for going. So maybe we have to explain that also, right? So let's just fill this in. Osev eno holech. So he doesn't burden himself with going to a place where they are flourishing in Torah. Okay, and schar ma'aseh biado, he says he gains from learning, but he could have gained more. In fact, you know what, Nava, this actually sounds like it does support what you're saying, or at least opens the possibility for what you're saying, because this guy, what the Meiri says about this guy is it says that he says that it's a quantitative thing. In fact, he even uses the word Torah, he would get much more, right? So it does sound like maybe it just means that it's a quantitative thing. So maybe you could, okay, so let's, I'm gonna put Nava's answer in here also. So the guy who went but didn't succeed. One answer is that one answer is I'm not lying. Okay, he gets the minimal reward for learning based on what he does understand, even though it's not a lot. Yeah, anyone else have any I guess we're now moving on to either for either of these two first guys.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so I mean, I wasn't here in past weeks, so I don't know if this was covered, but let's say somebody only has like 45 minutes to learn.
Yeah.
And it's like a 10-minute like walk to the base. So
Right.
what, like in that case, is it better to go and spend 20 minutes from the 45 in like commute, or is it better to just stay at home for this entire?
Right. So we actually asked that exact question, although I think we might have even said 45 minutes. But anyway, yeah. So good question. So the way we learned it last time was, and that was kind of what we were getting at. I think this was Brooke's question about like, is it saying that going to the Beis Midrash is always preferable to not going? What if it's a lane Beis Midrash? What if it's really far away? So I think the way we answered it is that the Mishnah is not giving you absolute things. It is giving you a cost. ultimately you're going to have to do a cost benefit analysis, but this is just spelling out the pros and the cons. So like let's say you say that the benefit of going to the Beis Midrash is that you're going to have lots of people to discuss stuff with, but if it's a long commute to get there and you only have 10 minutes there, so then you have to ask yourself, what's more valuable to me, having 10 minutes of discussion with someone about ideas or having 45 minutes of learning by myself? And I don't think there's a clear answer. I think that is actually dependent on who you are and what you're learning and how much you can accomplish. I can see there being a thing where, like, there are there are certain chachamim where I would gain more in a 10-minute discussion with them than I would of 60 minutes learning on my own. And then there are other cases or other subjects where, like, I would gain much more learning on my own, So I think it's just it's a cost benefit analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good question though. Okay, I have a theory here about what does it mean that this guy gets the reward for going. Okay, so I think the idea is like this: is in learning, there are two things that you're doing. Okay, maybe there's more than two things, but there's the knowledge you gain, but then there is also attaching yourself to the value of truth seeking. Okay, and let's say you have a person who, let's say you have a physicist, okay, who is trying to understand, fundamental law of physics, and spends his whole life investigating and like trying to come up with theories and doesn't actually get anywhere, right? Would you say that he wasted his life? And I would say that the answer is depends. If you hold by an accomplishment-based value system, like in America, where like a lot of Western values are based on accomplishment, then the guy wasted his life. But if you hold that the value of truth is seeking, is in the learning lishma, seeking truth for its own sake, then even the guy who doesn't end up finding the ultimate theory is still gaining from pursuing the truth. Let me just supplement that with an excerpt from a book. Hold on just a second. Yeah, sorry. So this is one of my favorite plays, Our Town by Thornton Wilder. I played this in Koheles. I don't know if you remember Nava, but the scene at the end. But there's a scene in the very beginning where he's talking about the narrator is talking about So he says he's talking about this kid who was like the paper boy, I think. Joe Crowell. So the narrator says, I want to tell you something about Joe Crowell there. Joe was awful bright, graduated from high school there, head of his class. He got a scholarship to Massachusetts Tech, that's MIT, graduated head of his class there too. It was all wrote up in the Boston paper at the time. Going to be a great engineer, Joe was, but the war broke out and he died in France. All that education for nothing. Now, when I read that, I was like, that's not what Judaism holds. We don't hold that if you spent all those years studying Chachmas Hashem and then you die, that it was all for nothing, because we hold that there's value in seeking the truth per se. And that's again, radically different value system than in other, than even in other societies that value education. So I think the reward for going is he is making a sacrifice, okay, of in material well-being in order to pursue truth. Okay, and that is something that is rewarded independently of how much accomplishment he has in learning. And so again, I'm not denying what Nava said, is that this guy will inevitably get knowledge, but I don't think that's what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is saying that just the going, the fact that he's giving up on his family and friends and conveniences and putting himself into a situation where he's going to be involved in seeking truth, even if he doesn't actually like attain a lot, that decision, that bechira, use of his bechira, is something that God rewards independently of his learning. And I'll give you another example of this. If a person gets Alzheimer's, right? Let's say you learn for decades, right? And let's say you get like Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that, or you suffer a brain injury and you forget all your Torah. Do we say, oh, that guy, like, all those years were for waste? No, we say that you, because you engaged your soul in the quest for truth, even if you don't remember what you learned due to some unfortunate thing, you still gained from that learning. So I think that's what it means. Okay, any questions on that?
Yeah, I do. I just have to phrase it.
Sure.
Is the reason for this because you were kind of rejecting more negative things that you could be doing with your life, or because you're like actively seeking out a more positive.
Okay, great question. So I'll give you, I think it could be either. I'll give you two proofs, okay? Or no, two indications of that. One is the opening two psukim in Tehillim, okay? Tehillim Perek Aleph. So that's Bereshis, that's not Tehillim. Tehillim Perek Aleph says, Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzas risha'im uv'derech hatayim lo amad uv'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Happy / praiseworthy is the man who does not follow the counsel of the wicked, who doesn't stand on the path of sinners, who doesn't sit in the session of mockers. But only in the Torah of Hashem is his delight, and in his Torah he thinks day and night. So a lot of the Mepharshim here say that basically your energy, I think we said something like this last time also, you have a certain amount of energy of energy that you can use to engage in certain pursuits, time and energy. So what Tehillim is saying that in a certain sense it's binary, okay, that either you are involving yourself in worldly pursuits, like for example the Meiri says Rishayim here means people who are involved just in money, Chatayim means people who are involved in physical taiva, and Leitim is people who are involved in like honor seeking, okay? So you're involved in one of those three value systems, or you're investing your energy in Torah. So according to that, that's like what Nava said as one possibility, which is this guy he could have remained at home, and since he's not cut out for learning, his energy would have inevitably flowed elsewhere to like just some sort of worldly pursuit. But he's moving away from that and going to Torah, and even though he's not successful, he is still rerouting his energy to Torah. That's one interpretation. The other way to say it is, I think, supported by the second clause in the Mishnah, that the Meiri says he gains from his learning, but he could have gained more. And I would say he loses out by not investing that extra energy in leaving his comfort zone for the sake of truth. So in other words, you look at this guy is learning at home, right? You can't say that he's not involved in learning. And in fact, this guy is probably not going to be involved in all these other worldly pursuits. However, he had an opportunity to really move out of his comfort zone and invest himself in learning in an even better way. And he's not doing that. So you could say that this first guy, he's getting rewarded because he's doing a positive instead of a negative, or you could say he's doing more of a positive instead of just like being content with where he's at. So I think you can answer both ways, Nava. Okay. Last two categories I think are fairly easier, right? So the Meiri says that for a chassid, he's toiling this much for love of Torah. And then Russia is he's degrading Torah and is lax in its performance. And likewise, the Sforno said something similar here, as he says that he is he's attaining merit by honoring the Torah and the one who gave it, in that he bothers himself to go and seek it out at a gathering place. So how is the Meiri learning these last, hold on a second here. Holech v'ose chassid. What? Oh, did I type this in the wrong box? Yeah, I've been typing this in the Rambam box. Whoopsies. It's supposed to be in the Meiri box. There we go. Oops, now it's all messed up. Okay, there we go. There and sorry. Yeah, okay. So Holech v'ose. So he values truth seeking and is successful in it. Okay, chassid. So Meiri says he toils for love of Torah. He toils for love of Torah. And then Sforno says he honors the Torah and its giver. So and the Sforno says he will increase the net good that comes from his learning. In fact, you know what? I think Sforno actually is answering this the best, because what is this? If you think about this guy, what is he doing? So he is gaining the most for himself. he's also helping his friends gain the most, and they're helping him gain more because they're doing it publicly. And he's spreading a good reputation for Torah because it is something that people respect. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Okay, let me put it this way. People who are from out of town, I think or from circles where like there are a lot of Bali Tshuva, I think people look at going to yeshiva or seminary in a different way. Like here in New York, it's like very, or in big Jewish communities, it's almost a standard thing that people will go to yeshiva or seminary. But there are certain places where if you went to seminary or yeshiva, it'd be like, oh, you love Torah that much, that you're going there. It's kind of like nowadays it's standard for people to get an undergraduate degree. But if you went and pursued a PhD or even sometimes graduate school, people are like, oh, wow, like you're really like dedicating yourself to this. So it's like a Kiddush Hashem, not Kiddush Hashem. It's a honor to Hashem by honoring his Torah, So it's, but I think what makes him a chassid is not that he's honoring Torah. What makes him a chassid is that he's doing maximum good for maximum people, and honoring Torah is another way to do that. So I think we answered that, unless we have any questions on that. And then Russia is the opposite, right? Which is that not only is he missing out and depriving his friends of benefit in their learning, but he is degrading Torah by giving the impression that it's not a worthwhile endeavor. Okay, and that's what makes him a Russia, is he's failing to maximize goodness, or he's I can't say this guy's maximizing badness, because if he went around like violating Torah, then that would really be a Russia. But this form of saying that it's just the opposite of a chassid. Okay, so that's the Meiri. Any questions on the Meiri?
I just want to clarify for the Russia. He's in a position in which he can learn Torah or do something else, and he's just choosing not to learn Torah, or he's not actively going.
Sounds like he's just not learning Torah. He's lax in his learning of Torah. Doesn't sound like he's, according to Meiri and Sforno, doesn't sound like he is actively doing bad things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that's why Sforno is just saying that it's that Russia is the opposite of what we mean by chesed here. Not that he's evil, but that he's just like a non-good doer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, but we'll see. Rabbeinu Yonah takes it a different way. Okay, ready for Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah is the most radical of all of them. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah says like this. Okay, one who goes and doesn't do. Ein perusho she'eino osa klal. The explanation is not that he doesn't do at all. Mikol ma sheshama bebeis midrash. Anything that he learned in the Beis Midrash, ve'eino makayim mitzvos, and doesn't fulfill the mitzvos. Okay, that was a lot of negatives, but you'll get the picture in a second. She'im kain, for if that were the case, Rasha Gomer, he would be a total Rasha. Meaning, this first guy in the Mishnah, don't think that it means that he learns and then just doesn't do any mitzvos, because that guy would be a Rasha. Ein harasha b'asiyas averos bilvad. Okay, hold on a second. Being a Rasha is not only determined by doing sins, but even one who refrains from doing mitzvos is a Rasha. And if a person doesn't do mitzvos or averos, Rasha Gamarhu. Averos. Yeah, he is a total Rasha. Amru Valze Amru, regarding this, it was stated in the Yerushalmi. Halomid ve'eno ose. This is a gruesome statement here. One who learns but doesn't do. Noach lo shenepa shil yaso al panav. It would have been better if at birth he had been smothered by his placenta and never emerged into the air of the world. Okay, so fancy way of saying that better if you were like aborted at birth. Okay, but in a very gruesome way. Okay, now before we even go further here, what is the radical difference between the way Rabbeinu Yonah is reading our Mishnah and the way everyone else has read our Mishnah. Anyone? I'll give you a hint. It all revolves around this word. Oops, sorry, this word. Okay, let's go on. You'll see it when we do this next one. I just want to see if anyone got it now. So, so that was what the Mishnah does not mean. It does not mean that we're talking about it. It's not talking about a guy who learns and then doesn't do any mitzvos. Okay. פירוש, rather the explanation of one who goes but doesn't do, the reward for going is in his hand. She'eno machazer achareihim. He doesn't chase after them to do them. Aval kishiyavo liado yasem. But when they come to his hand, he will do them. Val derech mikra makayim mitzvos lo b'kbiyus. And he will fulfill the mitzvos by incidentally, but not as a permanent value. Ki holik b'avleolam, because he's involved in worldly things, worldly vanities. Ach einenu rasha uskar yeshlo, but he's not a rasha, and he does have reward. Okay, so now it should be clear. How is the Rabbeinu Yonah treating the word oseh here? Or alternatively, what is the difference between the way the Rabbeinu Yonah is learning this Mishnah and the way everyone else is learning this Mishnah, the subject of the Mishnah?
Well, he is putting action as primary.
Yes, that is the main thing, right? He says, so everyone else learns that this Mishnah is about learning. Rabbeinu Yonah learns that this Mishnah is about doing mitzvos. Okay, and like we're saying, like in like Vega is saying here, everyone else basically put the emphasis on Beis Midrash and said, therefore, this must be about learning, and they interpreted oseh in light of the Beis Midrash. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah is saying, no, if it's talking about action, then it's only talking about the Beis Midrash in terms of like learning Torah in order to do mitzvos. But really, we're talking only about doing mitzvos here. Okay, so let's just fill that in here. We're not going to analyze him yet, but we're just going to fill in the facts. So Rabbinu Yonah says he holech leina oseh. So he I just blanked out for 1 second. He does mitzvos incidentally, but doesn't seek after them to do them because he's involved in worldly vanities. Schar halicha biado. It's funny, schar halicha, right? Saying that he's rewarded for going, which means he gets rewarded for those mitzvos that he does. Okay, I don't know why that's schar. Am I missing something? No, he's calling that schar halicha. Strange. Okay, let's go on and get the full picture. Osev eino holech schar ma'aseh biado. He does, but he doesn't go. The reward for doing is in his hand. Eino holech lebeis midrash. He doesn't go to the Beis Midrash. V'lo yodea eich ro'ei ledaktik b'mitzvos ulahachmir b'hen. And I think you have to add in a therefore. He doesn't know how to be precise in mitzvos or stringent in them. But he does them based on his own mind and his minimal knowledge. He has reward in this doing. Okay. Now, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I think I've seen Bali Tshuva in both of these categories. Okay. So, and again, in Seattle, then our shul at home is a Bali Tshuva shul. So I see like a lot of these people. So there are people who just are not very learned. Okay. So they'll do mitzvos, but they'll just do them wrong. You know, like when I'm home for Sukkot, you know, I'll see people, you know, picking up their lulav and esrog and then like holding it upside down or like shaking it in the wrong way or at the wrong time, you know? So they're doing it based on their minimal knowledge, they're just not doing it right, or they think they're doing a chumrah, they think that they're doing a stringency, but like they're not actually like doing a stringency. What they're doing is really just nothing, I remember one of the first ones of these examples that I heard was like, I know there's different opinions about what to do if you're like using a non-kosher microwave, but like, a lot of people say like, you have to double wrap it, right? I've known Bali Tshuva who'll say like, oh, well, I'm going to triple wrap it, so they just don't know in halacha that triple wrapping, there's no such thing. It's just like, it's no different than like double wrapping, so they want all their heart is in the right place, but they just aren't doing it, correctly. Okay. But then I've also seen Bali Tshuva, and again, I'm not picking on Bali Tshuva. I'm just like, these are the examples in my mind who they're doing tshuva, they're starting to become religious, but they're just not prioritizing like halacha. So like, when they get invited for a Shabbos meal at like an Orthodox Jew's house, they'll go to a Shabbos meal and like they'll make hamotzi and they'll wash their hands and stuff. But like when they're out on their own, like they won't necessarily do that. They're not committed to doing halacha. They'll do it when it comes up, or they won't daven. But if the rabbi of the shul says we need a minyan for like, someone has to say Kaddish, then they'll go to shul to make Kaddish, but they won't daven otherwise. Okay. So these are both like half-hearted commitments to the mitzvos. The first guy is committed to, what do you call it? He is committed to mitzvos in that
the system.
Yeah. This, well, you see, I don't want to say he's committed to the system. Oh, I know what you mean, meaning he's committed in general to the system, like, but just not in the particulars, or what do you mean by system?
Like they want to keep the laws, but they're not necessarily like, I think that both of these have the same root of that. Sorry for the background noise.
That's okay.
One of them is, one of them wants to, both of them want to put thought into it, but they think that their area of observance is the most important, so we'll do that one. Where in one case, they don't really understand the reason for something, so they'll kind of mess up on something and they don't really understand how it works.
Right.
And the other one, they think, well, my spirituality is a lot more important. And I think both have the same essential theme of they think that the thought is more important than the action. They don't understand that the action is actually supposed to reflect the thought, and they're supposed to build off of each other to create something new.
That's really interesting.
So they just kind of fail halfway.
Okay, that's really interesting. I definitely see that as a possibility. What I'm grappling with is what you're like. In other words, what you're describing is definitely a way of relating to mitzvos. Is that a specific subtype within these categories, or is that the definition of these categories? That I'm not quite sure about at this point. Maybe we'll get the whole Rabbeinu Yonah and then revisit it. Right now, let's just fill in the facts. Osev eno holech before we do the theory. Osev eno holech. So he does mitzvos consistently, but he doesn't bother to learn how to do them properly. Okay, schar ma'aseh biyado. How to do them properly, or how to be properly strict with them. So schar ma'aseh biyado is he will be rewarded for that doing, even though it's not necessarily correct. Okay, let's do the last two categories and then we'll look at a bird's eye view here. Holech v'oseh chasid. Okay, so this one should be easy. Shemachazer achar mitzvos. He seeks after mitzvos, right, to do them, obviously. And he fulfills every single detail of them, v'hachumros, and their stringencies. For he knows how to knows and is able to act beyond the letter of the law. So this is like the classical definition of a chassid, someone who goes beyond the letter of the law. Okay, so you need to know the law in order to go beyond the letter of the law. This is what the other mishnah in Pirkei Avos means when it says in am haaretz chassid. If you're an am haaretz, if you have, like only a basic knowledge and you don't have full knowledge, you can't be a chassid, because an am haaretz doesn't even know the basic level of the mitzvah. So you can't go beyond the letter of the law if you don't know the letter of the law. Okay, lo holech lo oseh rasha. So this guy is what Rabbeinu Yonah rejected at the beginning for as an interpretation of the first one. For he doesn't seek after it. V'gam ki yavo lo lemikre, and even when it comes to him incidentally, lo yasim, he doesn't do them. Yeah. Okay, so this is holech le'oseh. He learns how to do mitzvos properly and does every detail along with the stringencies. Okay, and he is a chassid because he is doing them beyond the letter of the law. And then Rasha is lo holech v'lo oseh. He doesn't do them. He doesn't go out of his way to do them. And even when they come to his hand, when he has the opportunity, he doesn't do them. Yeah, and that is a Rasha because he's just not making halacha a value at all, right? An example of this is I one time had this is my first year of teaching, had like a mini Shabbaton of some students from Hafter, and like the students who I invited over for that Shabbos were not religious, and I told them basically, like, I mean, I know there's different halachos about if you're at someone else's house, what should you do for Shabbos candles, so the halacha we were following was if you're at someone else's house for Shabbos, if you chip in for like the cost of the candles, then you're yotze, so I asked them, I said, like, do you want to like chip in for like, Shabbos candles? I said, like, if you have like a quarter or something like that. And one of them said, we're going to hell anyway. It doesn't matter. Now again, these were kids who were like not religious, but like, to me, that's like the attitude that this is saying here. Like if you said, for example, like, I want to be rich, and I told you, here's $5. And if you said, oh, if it's not $1 million, I'm not going to take the $5. We would say that you're stupid. We would say that you just don't get how money works. Like, yeah, $5 is different than $1 million, but if you value money, so then you'll take whatever money you can get. So too with like mitzvos is yeah, fine. You might not be the most religious person, and like maybe you're violating halacha left and right. But if you really held that halacha is good, so then any opportunity to do it, you're like, if you could do something very easily, like giving a quarter, and you're not doing it, so it really shows you just don't value halacha. Okay. So in the interest of time, I actually have to go, I have to go in a little while. And so we didn't finish analyzing Rabbeinu Yonah yet, but what I want to do is like this. I want to try tackling a question that we haven't tackled yet, which is, we have here 4 explanations of this mishnah, okay? And Rambam, I realize, again, is not a full explanation because he only explained chassid as someone who's going out of his way to perfect his midos, and Rasha as someone who's lax in perfecting their midos. But what I want to know is like this: anytime you have a machlokess, okay, then the question is, can you define the machlokess on a deeper level? Okay, and what I mean by defining the machlokess is, if I asked you, what each of them holds that this mishnah is about, then we'll get different answers. For example, Rashi, what would you say is the difference between Rashi and the Meiri? Let's say, okay, Rashi, Rabbeinu Yonah is the easiest one. He says this Mishnah is about 4. I'm not going to say this Mishnah is about 4 different ways to relate to doing mitzvos. Okay, like, he doesn't say it's about like intrinsically about learning at all. The only reason he brings in learning is because that's how you differentiate between a chassid and someone who is not a chassid, right? Who knows how to do mitzvos and doesn't know how to do them. How do you differentiate between Rashi and the Meiri? Right, Rashi says that the first guy is a guy who goes to the Beis Midrash but doesn't learn actively or doesn't understand what he learns. Second guy is a guy who learns at home but doesn't go to the Beis Midrash. Third guy is a guy who goes and learns. Fourth guy is a guy who doesn't go and doesn't learn. Meiri says the first guy is a guy who exiles himself to a place of Torah but is just not successful. Second guy is a guy who learns at home, and he could have gotten more success if he exerted himself and went to the Beis Midrash. Third guy is a guy who does both. Fourth guy is a guy who doesn't do either, and therefore the chassid is honoring Torah and the guy who and getting the most benefit out of it. And the fourth guy is a guy who is not honoring Torah and not getting the most out of it. So how do you characterize the way that Rashi is learning it versus the way the Meiri is learning it?
Is it possible that the Meiri is focusing more on self-sacrifice?
That definitely seems to be part of it, right? But that's not the entirety of it. And the reason why is because I think that at the end he puts chassid, again, if you take the Meiri and the Sforno together, he puts chassid and Rasha in terms of honoring Torah and degrading Torah, which doesn't seem to be entirely about self-sacrifice. In other words, it's true that the chassid is engaging in self-sacrifice and the Rasha is not engaging in any self-sacrifice, but the fact that they like broaden the mishnah to be about honoring Torah and degrading Torah, to me seems to indicate that it's slightly more than that.
So could it also be like a statement of community, like discussing community, in that the Meiri is saying that like you have, by giving up, you give up comfort to get that community, and that by not get like.
Yeah. Okay, good. I think that's an excellent way to put it. Okay, so and what, can you say Rashi? How is Rashi viewing it?
It seems like Rashi is viewing it more on an individual basis.
Exactly. Okay, so this is a perfect way to say it. So Rashi is saying like this: these are the subject of the mishnah is 4 levels of quality in your own learning. Okay. Your own individual learning. Okay. The Meiri is learning it as I don't know exactly how to put it, but like 4 levels of individual contribution to a community of truth seekers. Okay. In other words, that I'm trying to encapsulate all 4 clauses. That the first guy is not very successful, right? So he's not contributing to Torah in the sense of gaining a lot of mastery, but he has moved and left the conveniences of home to put himself into a place where he's going to learn Torah, and that like does a lot for his own individual commitment to truth and for creating a community of truth seekers. The guy who's at home is not contributing to the community as much as he could, but he is contributing by the fact that he's learning a lot of Torah. He just hasn't like maxed it out yet. And then the guy who's the chassid is maximizing his own learning, the benefit of learning for his friends, and honoring Torah and honoring God. And then the Rasha is like is not doing any of those things. Yeah. And the Rambam is really learning this as just particular examples of prioritizing your own overall perfection. Okay. That's why he doesn't even explain what the examples, what the 4 clauses are, because he holds it's not really about Beis Midrash or learning. Yeah. So what's interesting about this, and this is the last question that I want to have. I know, again, I would have liked to analyze Rabbeinu Yonah more, but we don't have time today. So the question is like this, and it's always a little speculative, but what makes each of these Mefarshim look at the Mishnah and take that approach versus the other approach? Okay, in other words, Rabbeinu Yonah looked at this Mishnah and says, oh, this is clearly about how you relate to doing mitzvos. Even though Rabbeinu Yonah saw that it says Beis Midrash, he's like, Beis Midrash is just about learning how to keep halacha. Whereas Meiri says, this is about community, and Rashi says, this is about like, your own learning and how to maximize your own learning. And Rambam looks at it and says, this is about calibrating your own relationship to seeking your own perfection, So like, can we say anything else about like, I don't know, about like what led each of them to take this approach, or is that just pure speculation and the only way to know is to interview them? I don't know if that question's clear.
I have a possible idea for Rashi. I don't know so much about the other ones, but
sure.
I know that Rashi was very revolutionary in that he was actually he actually started explaining like the pshat, and I mean, from what I know, I could be wrong, that he was like the first or among the first to start doing that. So before him, people couldn't really understand. People had a harder time understanding what like Tanakh and what the Gemara was saying. So in that case, you could be seeing it as like more of an individual basis, because like people go, but they might not fully understand what they're learning.
Okay.
So
So
I'm not sure if that makes sense.
okay,
Yeah.
so I hear what you're saying, and I think that would be speculative because that what you're trying to do, just to define what you're trying to do here, you're trying to explain why these Mefarshim took this interpretation based on their overall approach to everything. And I think that it's possible that you're correct, but that would really be saying that each of them, that every interpretation they gave of everything is going to be like governed by their own worldview, you know? And I think like that's just very, very speculative. Like it could be, it could not be, like, you know, like our theory would be thrown out of whack if we found Rashi's other commentary where he gave one of these other explanations. What I'm looking for is not so much like what made them in their mind see it this way. I'm looking for what assumptions about this mishnah or about a part of this mishnah did each of them make, which governed their interpretation of it in this way. And I'm going to just give a possible answer because I don't have a full answer. I'm just going to give a possible answer so you know what question I'm trying to ask, and then we can like leave it as a tzarech iyun for now. Okay. Let me put it this way. The question is, how do you view the Beis Midrash? Okay. Rashi is viewing the Beis Midrash, and I don't mean as a whole. Like you could view the Beis Midrash in all of these ways. Like I think Rashi would agree with the Meiri and the Rabbeinu Yonah and the Rambam. But the question is, in this thing, when we talk about halicha leBeis Midrash, what is the subject? So Rashi's looking at it as a Beis Midrash is where you learn, okay, and therefore the Mishnah is about 4 different ways that people engage their learning to get 4 different results. Okay. Meiri is learning the Beis Midrash as a communal hub for Torah. And therefore he's learning that the whole thing is about the relationship of the individual to the community vis-a-vis the place of Torah in that society. Rabbeinu Yonah is learning, he's saying that learning Torah, what's the purpose of learning Torah is avodas Hashem, is serving God. And the Beis Midrash is just the way to facilitate that. But ultimately, the reason why we learn is to be able to implement what we learn. And so he's learning the Beis Midrash as that in this context. And Rabbinu and Rambam is saying Beis Midrash is an example of an institution that gives you opportunities to perfect yourself. And we're learning about 4 orientations that people have towards their own self-perfection. You know, so what I'm trying to suggest here is not like what is there in the Rambam's view, worldview, or Rashi's or Meiri's or Rabbeinu Yonah's worldviews that made them take this interpretation. I'm saying that according to, like, if you went to Rabbeinu Yonah and he said, hey, Rabbeinu Yonah, you want to go to the Beis Midrash? Then he's going to say, oh, Beis Midrash, going to the Beis Midrash is like, Beis Midrash is like a way to facilitate serving God, you know. And therefore, this Mishnah, which is about going to the Beis Midrash, is about 4 different orientations people have about their avodas Hashem. Rashi is saying Beis Midrash is a place where you learn. So we're going to talk about 4 ways in which you learn. Meiri is saying Beis Midrash is like a feature of the community of Klal Yisrael's truth seekers. So that's the approach I'm trying to take here. You know, I hope that at least clarifies the question, even if you don't accept the answer. It's just trying to go one level lower. One level, not lower like that, lower as in like more fundamental, to say what is at the root of these different interpretations of this. And I think the reason why it's useful to ask this question is, like, you know, let me give an analogy here. Okay, take a gym, right? Like a gym where you work out. There are people who relate to a gym as places where you are basically where you are making yourself into a healthier person. Okay, and exercise is part of that, and therefore you go to the gym as part of your health regimen. There are other people who go to the gym to work out, to be healthy so that they can live longer lives. So they're looking at it as like a longevity, like, you know, place. Then there are other people who look at the gym as places to make yourself more attractive, you know, and their whole value system is in terms of attractiveness. And then maybe there are other ones also. So all of those things, they're not mutually exclusive because everyone is engaging in the gym for different reasons. But I do think it helps to ask yourself, how do I relate to the gym? Is it a temple to the body? Is it a temple to, you know, like, sorry, to physical beauty? Is it a temple to health? Is it a lab for extending my life? Or how would the Rambam view the gym? Is it's a place where you can attain physical health so that you can serve God, you know? Like, is it a place where you can like work on your physical self so you can serve God? I think it's similarly useful to look at the Beis Midrash through these four lenses. Is a place where you can learn, that's Rashi, a place where you go to perfect yourself, that's Rambam, a place that embodies a certain value of truth seeking in the community, that's Meiri, and then a place where you are training to serve God, and that's Rabbeinu Yonah. And all four Rishonim would agree with everyone else that all of them are good ideas, but their commentary reflects different ways of classifying the Beis Midrash, of defining it. Okay. That's all I got for today. Let's stop here. And I'm just going to stay on for 1 second after I stop recording.